Welcome back. Thank you for staying with KTN Prime. We continue with our deliberations right here in studio, centered on the parliamentary scorecard in this particular year, where Mzalendo Trust have actually released a report highlighting some of the key priority areas that Kenyans want addressed, whether parliamentarians actually focused on those key priority areas, and equally the most active, the least active on the floor of the House in terms of their three roles: oversight, legislation and representation. In studio, I'm joined by the program coordinator at Mzalendo Trust, Gitungo Wamere, as we continue with our conversation right here. So right before the break, we talked briefly about public participation and how meaningful public participation is important. But just to take you back to that point where there are members of parliament who are not vocal in whatever way on the floor of the House. This whole year, zero contributions. But some of them are actually not first-time MPs. They have been voted in time and time again. I don't know if your report highlighted what this means, especially from an electorate point of view, that these leaders who don't speak in parliament are voted in again. What does that mean in terms of the electorate and their understanding of the roles that MPs should be conducting?
Well, yeah, and it's a trend that we have seen over time. At some point, we did an analysis on whether the performance of a member of parliament determines whether they will be elected or not. Like, for instance, there's a particular member of parliament who has not spoken for 12 years. And this is the third election that he won. So now, if you extrapolate that to now send it back to the voters and ask yourself, why do voters still elect this kind of a person? A person who has also been captured on live TV sometimes, talking in total disdain about what the role of parliament in terms of speaking on plenary or even in committee sessions. In fact, before even I go to what it means, in fact, this is just a tip of the iceberg in terms of who speaks or who doesn't. If attendance, plenary attendance records were posted on Parliament's website, there is quite a number of members of Parliament by now who would have lost their seats, because by law, if you miss 8 consecutive sessions, that means without an approval from the speaker, that means your seat can be declared vacant. So if we had such kind of data, like I said, if our democracy was sophisticated to that level, open to that level, there are quite a number of members of parliament who would be losing their seats, because there are those who don't really attend.
Have there been sessions in parliament where the National Assembly or Senate that have been cancelled in totality due to lack of quorum?
The report indicates, I've said slightly over a quarter of the sessions have had a quorum hitches. Sometimes business has been adjourned because there are not enough members to deliberate on the business. So going back to the citizenry, sometimes and also bearing in mind, or also acknowledging that we need civic education in this country, sometimes citizens are authors of their misfortunes. Because why would you elect a person who does not represent you? So the other factors may be that citizens consider factors that do not really matter, like the party that you are in, ethnic allegiance. In terms of this country, we don't have a campaign financing law, so the campaign, the political marketplace in this country is for everyone who has money that we don't even know where it came from. So there is that aspect of voter bribery. So a certain member of a candidate may decide that tonight I'm pouring money in this constituency, and people may vote on that basis, not knowing that for the next 5 years they will pay for it. I think we need to come up with a very elaborate civic education curriculum and educate Kenyans, especially on the role of members of parliament, because I still hold it that majority of Kenyans do not really appreciate or know the role of a member of parliament, because like a few years ago we did another study on the demands that citizens usually make to their members of parliament. And majority of the demands were so personal, like you will see a citizen somewhere requesting for school fees, requesting for hospital bills. Of course, I know in our culture, our African culture, we have that culture of fundraising in Harambe. But if we make the role of a member of parliament primarily to be dealing with those personal issues, rather than pushing a member of parliament to go and legislate and ensure that as a citizen, I don't need to do a Harambe to go to hospital. I have an insurance that can pay for me. As a citizen, I don't need to do a Harambe to take my son, daughter to university or wherever. We have a national bursary system that can take care of that. I think we need to stop personalizing solutions in this country and make sure we have structured systems that deal with our issues as citizens. So we deal with poverty, like I've said, then we deal with ignorance, with civic education. Then I think we will eradicate this problem of people coming with money during campaign period and bribe their way into parliament.
Okay, we talked about the parliament's responsiveness to issues relating to public interest. We will talk about the negatives that, finance bill, Kenyans didn't want some of the clauses, but they were still passed, Let's talk about the priority areas that might have aligned with public interest, if there are any. Because currently we see so much clamor around ensuring NGCDF is enshrined in law, bearing in mind what the courts had to say and giving it a timeline of up to June 2026. Is there any bill that sort of aligned with public interest? And perhaps you could give us a comment on NGCDF as well.
I'm struggling to find out a law that has been assented by the president that really solves our very immediate problems as a country. But there are laws that have been assented by the president that are okay, like there is a law on climate, of course, laws on. But those are, I think, they usually pass them so fast because they are mandatory laws on sharing of revenue, laws on taking money to the counties. Also, if you go now to the section of motions, the section of questions, you will find MPs who are very active in terms of asking some very basic questions that affect their people. And also, in terms of this needs to be highlighted. There is a section of young members of parliament who are really doing a good job, and you have seen them also coming up as some of them coming up as most vocal MPs. Yeah. But again, the problem with issues like motions, which are usually brought up by individual members of parliament, issues of questions, sometimes there is no follow-up mechanism on how, whether they have been implemented, whether the relevant ministry department has followed up on that question or the motion and implemented it. So there is a gap in terms of post-legislative scrutiny. There is a committee on that in Parliament that is supposed to do that, post-legislative scrutiny, like the committee on implementation. But again, most of the times when they are on ground doing their reports, they cite issues of not being resourced well. So it's not all bad, because we have started discussing the issues of people who are not at least inactive. So there is quite a number.
Positives as well.
In fact, if you look at some of them during some of these voting on some of these issues that were taken on roll call, you will find some of them who went against the grain of their political party. Some of them very young MPs, first timers, and said, no, I won't vote as per my political party, I won't vote as my party leader, I will vote with the people. So still there is hope. There's quite a good number.
And I think that leads us to the next question, because we've seen CS question time on the floor of the House. The obvious question would be, how impactful has it been vis-a-vis when a CS is called through the committees? Which one actually is more impactful in terms of getting more questions, holding the relevant leaders to account? according to your report?
In terms of comparing effectiveness on plenary in the committee, yes. We haven't really done that analysis. Okay. But as experts in that area, as people who monitor Parliament on a daily basis, I think we haven't, even Parliament itself has not really appreciated the question time on plenary. It's a new thing. Bearing in mind with our 2010 constitution, it's something that was newly introduced into this presidential system. So I think in terms of being thorough, in terms of scrutinizing, in terms of asking questions on plenary, I think it hasn't come out. It hasn't come out. The effectiveness has not come out clearly like it does in committee. You know, in committees, it's very investigative. There is cross examination. Other committees, I think it's more effective. I think when this regime came into power, I think they thought on plenary it will be fast, it will be effective, since sometimes in committees also it will be public, because it will enhance also citizen accountability. But I think in terms of what they envisioned then, it hasn't really it hasn't really paid up in terms of what they were expecting. Hopefully, maybe by the end of their term, we will see a member, a CS, who has come on the floor of House and something has been done out of the question time during plenary session.
Well, time will tell. There's a common narrative that Parliament is perhaps an appendage of the executive. Has this narrative come out in the report? Because if we go to recent past, when the president was reading his State of the Nation address on that hot topic around the Adani and the PPP deals in the country, the members of Parliament were quite jubilant and they clapped enthusiastically when the president said no Adani deal will continue between government and that particular company. Yet some of these legislators were at the forefront in shouting how important these Adani deals are, not just in the Ketrako deal, but equally in terms of improving infrastructure at our international airport, Jomo Kenyatta. Appendage of the executive, is it?
There's some sort of irony that you have brought out so clearly. When the president was supporting the Adani deal, or was for the Adani deal before the Americans raised the issue of corruption and whatnot, all members of Parliament were happy with it, and even in rallies during weekends, they were in support of the deal. Then all of a sudden, the president comes into Parliament. I don't know whether he consulted them or he did not. He says that the deal has been revoked, and all of a sudden they are clapping. Then you wonder, are these people doing their oversight job, or are these people waiting to be told what to do, to rubber stamp? And truly, our Parliament is like a puppet being puppeteered by the executive. That is so clear. Even in the finance bill, we keep on going back to the finance bill. When the president was for it, as a matter of fact, he threw them under the bus. When he was for it, they were just stamping all over, saying
and
we will pass this. They were not even listening to their constituent. But all of a sudden, when it was withdrawn, you had them, even some of them, going to their constituencies and saying they need to be forgiven by their constituents. So I think Parliament needs all the 416 members, I think, need to take their constitution, where they have kept in their houses, in their offices or whatever, then go to the chapter on representation and reread on their role, because what they are doing now does not really match with what the constitution mandates them to do, because at the moment they are truly an appendage of the executive.
And perhaps that's why over the years we have a low rate of retention during the general elections, where MPs are voted out, majority of them, and that should be telling in terms of listening to the wishes of the people against the whims of the executive. Let's talk about some of the bills that have threatened to undermine constitutional provisions. Bill of Rights, Chapter 10 of Article 10 rather of the Constitution. Talk to us about some of these bills that are not too friendly in terms of how majestic our constitution is?
There are bills which really touched on two themes. There are two that touched on anti-corruption laws, and there's one that I think it's still in Parliament, that wanted to regulate demonstrations, that wanted to really tamper with freedom of assembly, freedom of all. Look at the chapter on Bill of Rights. That bill really upsets all those provisions.
But what was wrong with that particular proposal? From the MP's point of view, they mentioned that, the organizers should be held responsible. Yet we've seen destruction of property.
From where I sit, I don't think there is anyone who wants to run away from responsibility. What you're saying is there are enough laws to ensure that there is order when there is protest, when there are people in the street. There is the Penal Code. There is the Public Order Act that describe how you should conduct yourself. You shouldn't harm, you shouldn't destroy other people's property. Then why do we want to over-regulate a very small aspect of our democracy? In fact, an aspect that defines our democracy, because it is only when people can stand up and speak or voice their issues that when you can really say that this is a democracy. But if you want to over-regulate that small aspect, then you read mischief from the person who wants to regulate that. Again, there are so many other laws that we need. Regulating demonstrations I don't think it's a priority unless there is something that the sponsor of the law is not telling us. The other one was on diluting the anti-corruption laws, and I think at some point that there was an outcry even by parliamentarians themselves, and I think it's stuck somewhere, I don't know which level. So since early this year, it has not been spoken about a lot, because it wanted to remove the provision whereby if you are convicted of corruption, or you are in court for corruption, you can still run for an election. I think that one would claw back all the gains that we have had in terms of having our anti-corruption legal framework.
Okay, so much to talk about, so little time. As we continue, the high cost of living featured prominently, and it'll be a two-level question in terms of why exactly high taxation did not feature in terms of some of the issues that Kenyans want addressed by these legislators. Yet this is the house that passes some of these taxation laws. And equally, when we heard from the President's State of the Nation address, on paper, they painted a good picture of the state of the economy in the country. Inflation is down to 2.7%. In figures, that seems quite okay. That the cost of fuel has gone down ever since this government came into power. Our foreign exchange reserves are doing well. The Kenyan shilling is performing well against the dollar in the forex market. So when all this is said and done, at the end of the day, there seems to be an irony and a disconnect. Kenyans don't feel money in their pockets. So talk to us about this and perhaps some of the tenets that your report highlighted, touching on high taxation and this irony between, good figures on paper, but it's not translating to.
I think you don't need to be an economist to tell that the Kenyan economy is not doing so well. And when people talk about high cost of living, I think that phrase by itself tells you, when they're saying high cost of living, is that basic things are very expensive, they don't have money in their pockets, they are being taxed. And one thing, when a very nice picture is given of our economy is doing well, you only need to just walk around here and ask two people. When there is no money in your pocket, I think Kenyans will tell you an economy is doing well when there is money in their pocket. And there has been a regime in this country that made sure that people have money in their pocket. And I think when you see the GDP going up day in, day out, I think that is government spending. It's not you and I spending. It's not you and I going here in this markets that we have here, buying shoes or doing what. Go to people who are doing business. They will tell you nothing is working. So I think in terms of getting the feel of the people, in terms of getting the mood of the people, I think the government should do better, and they have institutions, they have all the infrastructure to know the public mood, the perception, and what is happening in the economy. And I think they all know. Like today, if you go to the bank, how many people are taking loans? The interests are so high. It's one indicator of telling you that the economy is not doing so well. I think that is just public, if I may say so, I think that is just public relations. If you speak to the people, the economy is not doing, and those very little, those very basic indicators will give you the picture, the true picture of what is happening at the macro and even at the micro level.
Okay, so as we start finalizing, let's talk about the previous parliament and how it performed in 2024 compared to 2023 and 2022, because it's the 13th parliament. Are we, okay, is Parliament performing better as time goes by, or it's a case of 5 steps backward, 3 steps forward? What exactly is a comparative analysis looking like? How does it look like?
I think I don't want to sound like a pessimist, but if you look at the effectiveness, the performance, the caliber of various parliaments that we have had, of course, Kenyans usually have a very low opinion on parliament and parliamentarians. I don't know why, because it's them who elect them. You will see, and some of those issues we have highlighted them in this report, you will see members of parliament in the 13th parliament publicly being arrogant with the people, publicly being very very flashy in a context whereby people are sleeping hungry, like they don't really care. If you are a representative of the people, at least you ought to be humane. You ought to be very humble with the people that you ought to have that grace of being at the level of the people that you are representing. So how would you walk in a million shilling watch in a constituency whereby half of them live under $1 or $2? It's very it's not humane. It's very inhumane. I don't think we have seen that in previous parliaments where we show people being very flashy, so members of parliament being very disdainful with their constituents, being very arrogant with the people that they are representing. I think the 13th parliament needs to pull up their socks. They need to when at this particular moment when they have gone on recess, I think they need to take their time and reflect on what their role really is in this country, and in terms of alleviating some of the issues that you are facing as a country. Okay,
let's talk about something that stands out after every election cycle, especially ever since 2017, where members of the opposition benches cross over to the government side in terms of being in unison when it comes to, giving the numbers that are needed. At the end of the day, majority have their way, So what exactly happens to these important roles that are supposed to be served in Parliament when the opposition and the government side actually come together and push an agenda? When the opposition leader is singing the tunes of the government, is this enhancing the roles in Parliament, or it does the opposite?
This is a problem that is at the core of our politics, our political culture, our political socialization, because we frame our politics, we frame our agenda, we frame our idea as it's our turn to eat. So if you are not in government, you are in cold. You are in the political cold, you are not eating. So I think the clamor, it's in joining the government, whether you are in opposition or wherever you are. The other problem is we don't approach our politics on an issue based. We approach our politics from a point of very mundane competition. I think we treat our politics like Arsenal Man U game. We are not serious with our politics. And that's why when you lose an election, it's very easy for you to cross over to the other side, forgetting everything that you said during the campaign, forgetting all what you stood for. In fact, during campaign, some of these people call each other very unmentionable names. And after elections, when there is an opportunity to eat, crossing over is very easy. I think we need to ground our politics on ideology. We need to, I think, change our political culture. I think make our politics a little bit sophisticated, because sometimes even when discussing politics in this country, you feel like it's not a subject that needs to be discussed, because the same things keep on recurring. Like now in 2027, you can already predict who will, after the election, what will happen, who will shake hands with who. Exactly. You can already predict those things. So I think we need to make our politics a little bit issue-based, a little bit people-based, so that we move on from these very basic things that we keep on discussing, of ethnicity, very basic things of who is eating, who is in parliament, which tribe is in parliament, in government, which tribe is not in government. Those are very basic, very mundane things that we should not, especially as a country of Kenya's caliber, the biggest economy in East Africa, when we still want to get an AU position. When we are discussing some of those things, I don't think we are doing ourselves, we are doing a disservice to ourselves as a country.
Okay, asante sana. We've talked about so much, covering most of the issues that have been encompassed in that report, the Parliamentary Scorecard 2024. In case you haven't interacted with it, make sure you do so. Take a look at where your MP rates in terms of his contribution, some of the legislative pieces he's been vocal about, or rather not being vocal about. We were joined in studio by Gitungo Wamere. He's the program coordinator at Mzalendo Trust. We definitely appreciate your input and taking your time to give us a breakdown. Asante sana.
Thank you so much. I appreciate this invitation.
Okay, and that's how we start up the end, or the end, we begin the end of tonight's edition of KTN Prime. Riveting discussion right there. Make sure you're adequately informed about how your parliamentarians have performed. But before we finalize today's bulletin, we just want to hint on what you'll be expecting tomorrow in terms of the big conversation on KTN Prime. As of 9 p.m, we will be hosting the Health Cabinet Secretary, Dr. Deborah Mlongo Barasa, who will be joining us in studio to highlight some of the issues that have played out in the healthcare sector. A lot, I must say, in terms of the UHC implementation. Talk about the impending doctors' strike that the KMPDU has actually threatened to down their tools come, 23rd December, if some of their grievances are not highlighted. What is the ministry doing about this? Equally, in terms of implementation of SHA, we'll get to talk about that with the Health Cabinet Secretary. So make sure you tune in tomorrow, where we will give you unrivaled news coverage as well. My name is Jesse Rogers. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoy the rest of your viewing. Have yourself a good night.